Welcome back to 28storms.com. This is your tropical weather update for Tuesday, July 12th. There are no active disturbances in the Atlantic or Eastern Pacific, so we look really good out there in the tropics today. All we have out there are a few weak tropical waves. One is approaching 30 degrees west out here in the Eastern Atlantic. We also have one approaching the Lesser Antilles in the Central Atlantic. And we also have a tropical wave interacting with the monsoon trough near Central America, providing them with above average rainfall. The threat of heavy rain, flooding, and mudslides will be the main concern as we go into next weekend here along much of Central America. As we saw in the previous graphic, we have a tropical wave interacting with the monsoon trough, which is going to keep surface pressures below normal, and we will have abundant rainfall throughout the period, which will really set the stage for life-threatening floods in Central America. So if you're in this area, be on the lookout for that and have a plan ready, because the rains are coming. I'm sure you've experienced a lot of rainfall already over the past few weeks. This monsoon trough has been located over you for the most of the hurricane season, and it really doesn't look like this pattern is in any rush to change. This is a daily trend. Whenever we look at the regional satellite imagery, the region with the most convection is always centered near Central America, and things are no different today. If we turn on the latest enhanced infrared, you see that much of Honduras and Nicaragua are experiencing heavy rainfall, and this extends well into the Eastern Pacific. Nothing is organized tropically, but this pattern will persist, and you will continue to see heavy rainfall. The only good news is that the rest of the tropics are very clear today. There's no active disturbances. You can see that the Gulf, Caribbean, and West Atlantic are very quiet. The Central Atlantic is completely void of anything significant in terms of convection. And the same can be said in the Central and Eastern Atlantic, where we do have some tropical waves exiting Africa, but they quickly fall apart as soon as they hit the open waters of the Eastern Atlantic. In the Pacific, we can still see the remnant exposed circulation of former Hurricane Calvin way out here to the southwest of the Baja Peninsula. That's now in a very stable environment, so it will not be making a comeback. And we've also seen a flare-up of convection just to the south of Manzanillo, Mexico, but based on the latest surface observations and visible imagery, it doesn't appear that there is much at the surface in terms of a circulation, and convection remains widely disorganized. And if we look at the latest sea surface temperatures here, if I overlay them on top of the satellite imagery, you'll see that the 26 degrees Celsius isotherm is not that far away from where the system is currently located, and it's moving into a region of cooler sea surface temperatures. And not only that, but it also appears that there is some easterly wind shear working its way into this convective flare-up. So overall, conditions do not appear favorable for any tropical development in the Eastern Pacific. And also, if we look to the south of Mexico, there is nothing organizing whatsoever here to the south of the Gulf of Tehuantepec or south of Central America. However, I do think that we could see our fourth named storm of the season within the 4 to 6 day period, and I'll show you this in some of the model guidance. This is the latest 12Z GFS 850 millibar vorticity analysis. As you can see, it really doesn't do much with our east coast low that we've been looking at in the models the last 48 hours, but it is very interested in what's going to occur in the medium range out here near the Gulf of Tehuantepec. This is the 7-day forecast, and we see an organizing tropical cyclone here. What will more than likely happen is the monsoon trough will begin to be pushed more toward the west as a tropical wave begins to move into the Eastern Pacific, and that will more than likely set the stage for medium-range tropical cyclone development here just to the south of Mexico. And just going back to that Carolina low that we were looking at the last 2 days, it's really not doing much with it today. The GFS, if anything, was a bit more aggressive yesterday with it. And so far, there's just really not enough model evidence to really support any development in that particular location. And we don't really have anything to keep an eye on satellite imagery just yet. If anything were to happen, it would more than likely occur along the tail end of a stalled frontal boundary in the medium range. But again, there's just not enough supporting evidence to really be that aggressive on that type of solution at the moment. And as you can see across much of the Gulf, Caribbean, and Atlantic, it keeps things relatively quiet throughout the foreseeable period. And that's about it from the GFS. The following animation comes from the 12Z CMC model, and if you recall, when we looked at the satellite imagery to the south of Mexico, there were absolutely no organized disturbances down there. But for whatever reason, the Canadians trying to show tropical development within 24 to 36 hours, as you can see starting off with this 850 millibar vorticity max that really doesn't even exist. So as I set this into motion, it develops that and takes it into Mexico. that's a bogus solution. However, I do believe this second tropical cyclone that it forms in the eastern Pacific, this is much like the 12Z GFS medium range forecast. So that's some pretty good agreement here near the Gulf of Tehuantepec for possibly Tropical Storm Dora to form down the road here, with the signs or initial signs of development occurring late this weekend into early next week. In the meantime, we see that the Canadian is no longer as aggressive with that Georgia-South Carolina low as it has been, and also it keeps much of the Gulf Caribbean and Atlantic quiet, although at the very end of this run we do see a couple more higher amplitude waves beginning to exit the coast of Africa. The latest European has yet to become aggressive on anything near the east coast of the United States, so we're really not expecting any development whatsoever out there, and much of the Gulf Caribbean and Atlantic are expected to remain quiet throughout the five-day period. But also look at what happens, much like the GFS and Canadian is beginning to show development just to the south of the Mexican coast here by day 5. And by day 6 it's continuing to strengthen. It's at least a 1,000 millibar surface low center heading just to the south of Mexico in a general west to west-northwest heading. So that's your tropical weather update for this Tuesday. Just to sum everything up, the main threat will be life-threatening floods across much of Central America. Much of the Atlantic appears to be quiet. The only area that could produce a tropical system over the next 7 days would likely be off the Georgia and South Carolina coast. However, there is really lacking evidence for anything right there, and the most likely region for development will actually be on the eastern Pacific side of Mexico in the 4 to 6 day range, where we very well could begin to see the initial signs of Tropical Storm Dora out there. So again, that's your update for today. Check back tomorrow for another extensive video.